Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay and the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Eric Lopez here with you. We will have the Black and Gold Banneret show here in a little bit, but obviously this week has been a difficult week for UCF alums, UCF family, whether you're in the football family or you're just an alum, a student, even a professor, as UCF's own Otis Anderson was shot and killed late Monday night, Tuesday morning in his home in Jacksonville, allegedly by his father. His mother was shot. She thankfully has, as of we talk, out of the hospital. Just kind of still even hard to comprehend with everything that's transpired this week. I'm joined by our old friend, Mr. Brian Murphy, who is always good with words. And I'm glad to hear he wrote for Black and Gold Banneret, hear his thoughts on Otis. And I wanted to have you on here, Brian, before, because you covered him all his entire career. You got to spend a lot of interactions with him, covering him, whether it be media availabilities, post games, and you obviously watched a ton of his games up close in person. This has hit hard, I think, for the UCF family. This affects not just fans, but affects professors that probably taught him in school, classmates, coaches. This has been a difficult week, hasn't it?
Yeah, and I think the best way to describe what Tuesday was like is just so many different emotions, but it's all pain and shock and anger and fury and sadness, and it's just terrible. Because for all we know about Otis Anderson, there has not been anybody who has had like a bad word to say about the kid. Always like really gracious with his time, really selfless, just a nice human being. And now he's gone, and the circumstances as alleged make it even more heinous. That it's just really hard. It's inexplicable to comprehend what has happened, and we're all coming to grips with that. And that's sort of what I tried to do on Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, was like come to grips with it myself, while also trying to be positive about what Otis Anderson gave to all of us.
You wrote for the Black and Gold Banneret about Otis, and I thought something that struck at me that you said, other than Mackenzie Milton, no other UCF player gave more memories than Otis. Just kind of expand on that, why you felt that way.
Yeah, well, it's certainly in this I called it the Gilded Age of UCF football, right? So this is the 2017 to, you can even include today if you want, but really 2017 to 2019, 2020. I think Mackenzie Milton is number one in terms of like, remember those sorts of moments, but Otis is number two. And I think there are, like, off the top of my head, just like two handfuls of things he did on the field. I'm not talking about him as a person off the field. We can get to that in a bit. But on the field, things that he did that we will always remember. The screenplay against USF that before the Mike Hughes touchdown, the perfect play as called by Adam Amin. He scored the game tying touchdown in the Peach Bowl that tied the game at 20, and UCF never looked back. Went on to score the 14 and the next 21 points and won that game. Getting them back in the 2008 AAC title game with a long pass play after the halftime. The famous photo that Brandon Helwig took of Otis completely juking an FAU defender out of his jock in 2019. And that's like a small like summary. I went through some more, and there's so much more that I could have gone through, but yeah, in terms of us as fans, because that's really what we're approaching it from. We're approaching it from a fan standpoint, because that's all we really knew him as. We knew him as Otis Anderson, the football player, first and foremost. He gave us more to remember him by, or more moments of pure greatness. than almost any player of this current run of success.
I think back to the 2018 title game where he caught that touchdown, broke it open, and remember he gave the peace sign, and that build, and that you were there in that press box. That place erupted, and it changed the momentum of that game. I mean, that was the thing about him, right? There was a flair. Anytime he got the ball, people were excited. I think back to the punt return for the touchdown against Pittsburgh. If UCF comes back and wins that game, I think that's an iconic punt return play that maybe we even remember even more. Right? There was just something like, I remember we spent a ton of episodes together talking about getting him the ball more, just because that was he made things happen in space.
And it just felt like sometimes they just weren't, and it was too bad because there were so many things he could do. And that punt return is so nuts. That punt return play, people should go back and look at it. Like, he tries to point out his blockers, but then is too fast, so he just outruns the blockers regardless, ducks under the punter as if he's limboing under the punter, spins out of another tackle, and scores a touchdown from 8 yards away. It's incredible. It's just he did so much. He was a punt returner, he was a receiver, a runner, and then I talked about how Anthony Tucker, the running backs coach for the past few years before 2021, had said he could have played corner, he could have played nickel, he knew offensive line assignments, he knew quarterback reads, he was the smartest player on that offense. Well, during Josh Heupel's reign here. He could do it all. He knew it all. He was, probably the most integral part of that entire offense.
Thing I remember, and I had some interaction with him. I will never forget my conversation with him on Media Day 2018. We actually ran that interview back then on this podcast. And the thing that struck me about him, and you had more interaction, so I think you could agree, there was such a joy of him talking football. He just enjoyed talking. He talked about how he loved the fact that he was kind of used as this versatile guy, as this kind of a utility guy, where he would attend wide receiver meetings and running back meetings. But then he also enjoyed the fact that he got to hang out with them off the field, go to bowling, go to movies together. Mm-hmm. He was a glue guy, wasn't he, in this locker room, I think, from a genuine guy. Like you said, everybody liked Otis.
Yeah, and I think, he was a running back at heart, but he really enjoyed just being on the field and showcasing how many ways he could beat you. Talking to Otis was fun because, Eric, you've been in this game long enough too, that there are players that are so tight with the media that are very sort of wooden. They don't want to say anything. And like they're not going to be a great interview. And Otis was never like that. Otis was always very relaxed and pretty brutally honest at times. I tried to mention that a few times in the article. But like sometimes he would take little jabs and say things that maybe, the SIDs may not love for him to say, but that was Otis. He was pretty honest. He was pretty open. He was always a great guy to talk to, very gracious with his time, never really wanted to rush you, just really, and as we're hearing more testimonials from his teammates, it really goes to show, like, it's not just the way we interacted with him or how he was around us. It was like that around everybody. He was just a really great guy to be around, according to everyone we've heard from so far.
And he believed in himself. There was that confidence, And I remember he told me he looked up to guys like Percy Harvin, who played similar role, at the wide out, but could run at the running back, could be a returner. He had guys he was looking up and, maybe people on the outside's like, well, you're too small or you're too this. He always believed in himself and in his abilities, which got him, obviously, with the LA Rams on the practice squad.
Sure. And actually, he really credited Adrian Killens, too, with sort of like, because those two guys, similar body types, not exactly the same, but similar body types, of them sort of challenging each other to prove to both of them that they could do it at this level. These were two guys, two boys really, who grew up, knew each other from the age of, I believe, 8 years old, running track in Florida. And they come to this program, and I think they both had the similar chip on his shoulder. Otis talked a lot about how Adrian really motivated him, to prove that just because I'm really undersized and I don't have a lot of weight on me, like, it doesn't matter. I'm still going to beat you. And, you can say this as well, Eric. Otis was really hard to tackle. He's a really, really tough runner. He bounced off a lot of guys. He had a really strong lower body. He had great balance. He was not a guy who, was 175 pounds.
You're right. And really, it was just so elusive. But yet you could just sense, you mentioned he was pretty honest. He would be sometimes too honest. some things he would say, but I kind of felt like the players respected him, right? Like he was one of those guys that could speak up and they would listen, I felt like. And I think that he just had that genuine respect from everybody.
He was real. I mean, he was just real. Right? And, I remember after the Pitt loss in 2019, he just goes up there and we ask him, like, how are you feeling? Because it was the snap the win streak. And he goes, I can't explain it. I'm a sore loser. I hate losing. We're pissed. And it's like, that's what we want. Not this like, well, we didn't play well today and execution. Like, no, like, give me what you're thinking. And he always told you that. And we appreciated that certainly in our business, but that's what he was off the field. On the field didn't matter. He was a real guy. He what you saw is what you got, so.
And I think that's why he related to the fans. And I think that's why the fans, this has been a tough week because I think there's a connection there that fans like that, right? They could just connect with a player like him from the field. And he had a way, he's one of those guys too, when even though he's playing, he kind of connected with you. Like if you were watching him in the stadium, whether he did this number 2 peace sign or things, he had a way just in his own way to kind of connect with the fans while he's playing. And I think there was that bond that he had. And it was it's just unique. I mean, Josh Heupel, I mean, so many people have come on social media and talked about him in droves. Josh Heupel said he was saddened and stunned by the passing. He was a tough, gritty, fun, and full of laughter. He made such a positive impact on our university, the community, and our locker room. I think that's well said, right? I mean, that's the best description of him, is he was a positive impact in so many levels.
Yeah, it sums it up pretty well. He did it. And it helps that he was really productive on the field too, because, usually there are lots of guys like that on every team, but, he was also immensely talented and had a lot of just like, create a lot of seminal moments for UCF football program. And that's, this has been a terrible couple of days. And I, it's at times like this, and I think we're doing it right now where, as tough as this is and as angry as I am and as much as I just want to like sob, it really helps to just think back of what good he has done to bring joy into our lives, and that we should be grateful for the joy that Otis Anderson gave us, because it was short-lived, but it will live on for a long, long time.
Yeah, you made a great point in your article, and I think and I agree with this 100%. I mean, it's always hard to deal with a tragedy like this, and let alone 23 years. Like I still can't comprehend that. However, if there is any positive or any way to kind of help, there's a lot of people that live a long time, longer, like 60, 70, 80 years, that didn't have the impact that he did in such a short period of time. That's really a remarkable thing, that he's made an impact. Like, he's going to live forever. People are going to remember. He's going to be a part of that UCF 2017 team, and the highlights will live there forever. We've seen UCF obviously put some clips. There's photos. Our staff at Black Eagle Banner have photos. I mean, he's going to live forever in that way. If so, I'm not saying that obviously it does not make it any easier, but that's impressive for a young man, 23 years, to make an impact like that.
Yeah, and I just hope it brings comfort to those who, as fans and as people who love this program and loved and respected Otis. For those who are mourning right now, to be comforted by the fact that, we still have all of this, that even though I hate that it's all gone, that there was so much to look back on and smile. And we'll always talk about it and reminisce and think about, like, man, remember that play? He's so good. He did this so well. Remember this, remember that. And like, there's just so much that I could have listed. He made such an immense impact in a short amount of time with a lot of people. And it's never forgotten.
Throughout the show, we'll have our staffs, Andrew Glukoff, Kyle Nash, Bryson Turner. They're also going to share their thoughts. One of the things we'll do in honoring Otis, each person will have two final thoughts that they will remember about Otis. I'll start with you, Brian, as we hear on this note. Yeah, obviously the 2. That's the thing that I remember, is the piece, the 2 number, the showman, if you will. What are 2 things you're going to remember about Otis for the rest of your life, as somebody who covered him up close, talked to him, and covered his entire UCF career, and basically saw him up close?
Yeah, so I think actually for us, I'll go like one on field and one off field. The on field thing is always is for me, even though it may not be the most consequential play in UCF history, even the most consequential play that he had, I think it's the screen pass in 2017 that set up, that was, was then kind of usurped by a USF touchdown and then set up the Mike Hughes touchdown. That at that moment, it's a true freshman, by the way. It's a true freshman, by the way. At that moment, that ground shook on that stadium, underneath that stadium in that moment. That is something that I will never forget. On the field, I think off the field, again, the guy was so real, and I mentioned in the article, he would say these things that he knew maybe he shouldn't say a little bit, and he would get a little shine in his eye and get that little smile. And the smile was highlighted, was sort of emblazoned, because he would always wear a mouth. He would always wear like a grill, like gold or
that's right.
And so like he's just shining from like eye to tooth, and I'll never forget that. He was a guy who I think that look is how I remember him, like smiling and shining brightly.
It's a great word there, and I remember, I'll never forget. He told me he came to UCF because he wanted to make a difference. He wanted to change. Because at the time, UCF had kind of struggled, had the winless season at 15. They had the 6-win year under first-year Scott Frost. He said, want to make an impact, a difference. And boy, he did that and then some in so many levels. We will have a regular show of Black and Gold Banneret. There's a lot of UCF news to talk about, but obviously we will be thinking of Otis, not only this episode, for a long time we'll be thinking for Otis. This show will be tribute to him, and our thoughts and condolences to Otis and his family on this tragedy. Otis Anderson, 23 years old.
This is the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. Now, here are your hosts, Jeff Sharon and Eric Lopez.
And welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. Jeff Sharon out this week on the episode. He had successful back surgery. He's recovering. You will hear from Jeff later in the show. He interviewed UCF Volleyball head coach Todd Dagenais. Of course, UCF Volleyball out in Los Angeles in the NCAA Tournament. That interview was recorded on Monday. You'll hear that interview on this show. Plus, Kyle Nash will join us later. We'll talk UCF basketball as our reasons for concern following UCF's back-to-back losses to Oklahoma and Auburn. Bryson Turner will join us. We'll break down the volleyball tournament aspirations, as well as softball coming out with a schedule as well. Of course, you can follow us on all of the social media platforms, Twitter and on Facebook. You can like us as well as our YouTube page. Subscribe there. And, of course, blackandgoldbanneret.com. And, of course, podcast. Make sure you give us a rate the review. Give us a 5-star review wherever you listen to this podcast. Joining me right now is our good friend, Andrew Glutkoff, to talk some football. And Drew, there's been a lot of football news over the last short week. So we're going to kind of scan through some of these big topics because a lot of UCF football news have come out. Let's kind of go backwards here first. Black Friday, UCF beat South Florida 17-13 with a dramatic finish at the end where South Florida drives. And, of course, we've seen the play by now, the sack, the clock ran out, the shebang with that. UCF finishes the regular season 8-4. We are recording this segment at 9:05 a.m. Eastern on Thursday. As of this segment being recorded, we do not know yet the bowl aspirations of UCF. In fact, you and I were just talking off the air. We don't know about a lot of bowl games at this hour, which is kind of strange. So I guess let's first start. Give me your final thoughts now that you have had a few days to think about. What are you going to think about when you think back? You were there on the 2021 edition of Black Friday.
Well, it was definitely a stolen game by UCF because they got out-offensed. UCF had a few chunk plays. USF had a few chunk plays. But overall, UCF's offense struggled a lot. And, you take away some big gains. Johnny Richardson, 8 carries, 94 yards, but he had a 42-yarder. So that's almost half your yardage right there. So but that's what UCF always brought to the table this year. Because this is not what we're used to seeing. Prior to the Louisville game, we see a lot of little things and then some chunk stuff when it finally opens up. Offensive line struggled, struggled badly in this game. And part of it was, as Coach Malzahn said, defensive coordinator let go. There was very little film to really know what they were going to bring. And the defense brought some wrinkles because you had a different guy running the show. Actually, you had two guys running the show. And the team struggled to adapt to it. It's why, if you actually look, they really fell flat, especially in the second half. It was kind of hold on for dear life. There was a lot of points left on the board, missed kicks and whatnot. That's always been something that's haunted UCF, but it really came home on this one because you were 3 yards away from losing this game. Refs got the call right, though, at the very end with the sack and the running out of the clock. Correct call. The 10-second runoff, and they would not have been able to spike the ball with 2 seconds left. We've already found that out. That's a no-no. Happened in a Miami game not too long prior. But this was definitely an escape win. But Jeff Sharon made a very valid point with rivalry games. You think, you can go 11-1, but if that one loss is against your rival, forget about it. And if you have only one win, it's going to be that rival game. That's the one you want. And weird things happen during rivalry games. It doesn't matter how you did the rest of the season. It's kind of like the reset buttons hit and everything else just doesn't matter. We saw it in 2020, when a bad South Florida team played like a world beater and went into a shootout with UCF. And of course, UCF came out on the good side. But weird things happen during rivalry games. So this was no different, but UCF held on for dear life. They took care of business and have officially taken the series lead 7-6 over those guys in West Central Florida.
The game, by the way, was watched by an estimate 711,000 TV viewers on ESPN. That's according to the cable Showbuzz Daily.
Good.
It's slightly up. It's up from last season's game, down from 2019 and 2017 to 2019. It's all way down from that, but up from last season game, which did under 600,000.
This wasn't a good game. I'll take that viewership any day. This was a boring game to watch.
Not a good. Not a really good game.
It was sloppy on both sides, and both defenses played very well. Both defenses had an outstanding game, but it wasn't an exciting game from the standpoint of outside the fan bases. Obviously, UCF fans and South Florida fans, they'll tune in to watch. But for the casual, this was not an exciting game. The offenses were pretty sloppy. And, that can turn a lot of people off. So I'm very thrilled that over 700,000 tuned in to watch this game. Take the ratings and run. Could that be a positive fallout that maybe some casuals from soon-to-be conference mates might have watched? Hard to say. But UCF's name's out there. They're moving up. To that deluxe apartment in the sky. So, take it for what it is. It's a win. It was an ugly win. Good amount of people watched it. They watched an ugly win. But hey, UCF 8-4. Who would have thought this would have happened after they opened 3-3? They went 5-1 to close the season. I believe we talked about it in a previous show that was really the best case scenario because we did not think UCF had really much of a chance at that point against SMU, and they got torched.
Yeah, we said that right after in the night shift edition after the Cincinnati blowout loss. Yeah, that was what we were hoping for, 8-4. Right,
and that was best case scenario, really. And look what happened. It may not have been pretty, but they found a way to win. This team doesn't quit. They've got some moxie. They seem to dig in when it really counts and hold the line and come up, with these gutsy wins. They're not pretty. They may take a few years off your life, but hey, they don't care how many points you scored or how many yards you didn't get. In the win-loss record, all they see are the number of W's and the number of L's. So 8-4, man, what a year.
8-4. Now, of course, the big news comes on Saturday after the Black Friday game. In fact, it was during the UCF Oklahoma basketball game. Dillon Gabriel announces he's entering the transfer portal and he is departing. Now, we're not going to dive into that whole deal. We did a very special night shift, Andrew and I, as well as Kyle Nash. We did an hour and a half on this topic on Saturday. It's on the same podcast feeds. If you're a podcast, more of a preference of a rather listen and watch the episode, you could do that on our podcast feed. I encourage you to do that. It was really strong. We got a lot of feedback and a lot of questions there. You can also watch it on our YouTube subscribe. So we're not going to dive into the whole Dillon drama once again because we just did an hour and a half, and I would rather you tune into that. However, I do want to ask you this, Drew, because this is a hot topic. I was on the Mark Moses show this week. I was on up in Melbourne, and I was asked about this. I was on the Beat of Sports in Orlando with Mike Tuck filling in for Mark Daniels, who was with UCF basketball. And I was asked the same question about Dillon Gabriel and why. And obviously this is all focused about Gus's offense. And even Dillon's dad's told Matt Michelle, the Orlando Sentinel, that they didn't think they fit the system and all that. And I want you to address this because this has been a topic you have talked about really since Gus arrived. And that is Dillon Gabriel and the Gus system in the scheme. How much of this is overblown? How much of this is a cop-out? How much of this is true? Because, and let's be real, let's be honest with the audience, this won't be the last player that's going to be enter the transfer portal. This is the new wave of college athletics. But your thoughts on the scrutiny here, where it's like the Gabriel camp saying, hey, this is not a good fit for us. It's one of the reasons. Are you buying this?
I'm not. I'm not really buying it at all. I think it's definitely a cop-out because, I mean, if you one of the things that dogged Dillon Gabriel is the fact he was viewed as a system quarterback, just a guy who just throws the ball deep and guys come and speed down the field and get it. Well, you need fast receivers for that. And when you had fast defensive backs who were able to help shut things down, things didn't go so well. But if you look at his stats, they didn't really drop off all that much. Yeah, the Louisville game was rough. Louisville's defense was pretty good. He only had 188 yards, which was the lowest of any start that he had. It was the only time as a starter that he had under 200 yards passing. You know what? Bad games do happen. He still threw for 3 touchdowns. But each game above that was 300 yards. And, against Bethune-Cookman, he was pulled later in the game when didn't matter. So if he was looking for inflated stats. So I don't buy that. The system works with the players involved. And the difference is this is a much more cerebral system. It's not as simple as chuck ball downfield, let receiver catch, which is really what the Josh Heupel system was all about. It worked because you had the talent to support it, but it was not a very complicated system. Gus Malzahn has a much more complicated system, and that's partially why Mikey Keene struggled really badly early on. It takes time to kind of grasp things, especially as a true freshman. So I'm not buying it, but I just want to hit this one little thing. As far as 2022 or 2021 goes, nothing's changed. He wasn't playing yesterday, he wasn't playing today, and he's not playing tomorrow. So in the end, nothing really changes. The difference is it's no longer part, the what if's gone. So it actually may take some stress off, but it opens doors for 2022 as far as, well, can UCF take advantage of the transfer portal? There's guys out there, and there's different coaches have different relationships. Something could come down the pipeline, and UCF could land someone with talent that fits the system. But I'm not buying it. If Dillon Gabriel wanted to, he could have fit the system. The system could have worked to fit him. It's not a it's 2 sizes too small, I can't change it. No, there's elastic involved, and there is give. So no, I'm selling.
Is there any concerns you have about Gus's offensive system at all? Because some people are just concerned in general. They're used to the UC fast and all that. You didn't get to see this. Gus did address this in the post game in South Florida, saying to be patient because we don't have all the bells and whistles. Do you have any concerns about Gus's system working in 2022 or beyond?
Well, I always tell people to give coaches 3 years. It gives them a chance to get their players in that fit the way they want it. Right now you're working largely with someone else's team. So, this was a team that went 6-4 last year. It had a lot of bad spots that needed working on. And while there has been improvement, it was not an overnight fix, and it's still taking time to address. So, I'm not concerned at this point. I mean, the only concern you could actually have is if you go historically and Gus's issues with quarterback development. Part of that is really, more recruiting. And then you had politics at Auburn kind of forcing his hand into certain things, which people don't talk about. There was a lot of booster manipulation and meddling within the Auburn system that really hindered a lot of things, a lot of external pressure. He doesn't have that at UCF. And I think that'll make it a little bit easier to kind of install things and put things the way he wants. Remember, true freshman and a bit of a patchwork on defense yielded an 8-4 record. And, a couple of those losses were really close losses. Louisville, Navy, those were close losses that could have gone, either way. Those are 50-50 games. So you're talking about a team that could have gone 10-2 with a lot of patchwork involved. It shows that not only are they starting to bring in guys that are helping fit like some of the transfers, you're also starting to bring out the talent that's within the team that you have, as well as adapting to the roster that you have, which, that's an important part of coaching is, you have a plate of stuff, now arrange it, make it work.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And again, let's see what happens when he gets his his personnel in. And I think you'll have a better feel for the offense moving forward. Plus, I think it helped the defense. I think there was better complementary football. Defense improved. I just don't think you can sustain winning 45, 42 games on a yearly basis. I think in the long run, this team will be a better all-around football team overall. But you just got to get the better personnel.
Well, and because you look at the depth. The depth wasn't there, and you had defensive linemen playing defensive end to start the season. I mean, that shows that you already had depth issues. You had a very thin linebacking core that got thinner as the year went on. The amount of injuries was ridiculous. But, I got to credit the team and the staff. They didn't quit. They didn't quit at all.
No, I agree with you on that aspect, that I think this roster's flaws were exposed based off the injuries. And I think they have to address it. And I'm not sure you can just quick fix this over 1 year, because next year I think they're going to be a pretty young roster. I think you're going to see a lot of new faces from that regard. And, we'll see how that goes. And that goes hand in hand with the schedule. The schedule came out for 2022. The big story there is UCF will have 9 of the 12 games will be played in the state of Florida, which will include road games at FAU and then at South Florida, which what could be, and is scheduled to be right now, more than likely the final game in the War and I-4 history between those two programs. You got Louisville coming in. You've got Georgia Tech coming in. What stood out to you about the 2022 schedule that came out?
Well, UCF has always been dogged for scheduling issues. This is the best schedule UCF's had in a long time. You still have talented teams in Houston, SMU, and potentially Cincinnati. We're not quite sure how that team's going to shape up after the offseason. But there's some talented squads there. And, while Georgia Tech not doing so hot, losing their star running back Gibbs to the transfer portal this week, there's still some talent there that just hadn't quite figured it out. And, you got a revenge game against Louisville on the calendar. I mean, all things kind of shape up. Hey, they value Power 5 matchups, even against bad teams. They value it. Well, you've got 2 on the schedule. It's about the best you can do, all things considered. And then diving out of the FIU series made a lot of sense, especially because the first one was canceled and it didn't look like it was going to be rescheduled. Get that FCS game in there, allow it to be a tune-up, because as you said, there's probably going to be a lot of new faces, a lot of adjustments. That's where that FCS game comes into handy. You can use it to improve yourself, to test and try new things, but it's not a scrimmage, Eric. It's not a scrimmage.
I'm not going to go there. And what could be the final conference schedule in the American, UCF will host Cincinnati, SMU, Navy, Temple. They will travel to East Carolina, Memphis, Tulane, and South Florida. I think anybody would admit the one thing we will miss about the American is going to cities like Memphis and Tulane. We will miss that.
Both a lot of fun. I've been to both cities, New Orleans and Memphis, during different times in my collegiate and post-collegiate careers. A lot of fun at both cities. We'll definitely miss that. The Little Apple doesn't, is not a bad city, but does not hold a candle to Nolens. I mean, can we honestly compare?
No, that's going to be a little tricky there.
Now, Provo versus, Memphis.
Ooh. Well, hopefully, maybe Memphis will join in a few years. We'll get that trip back down the road in the Big 12.
It would be nice.
Wouldn't it? Now, the big question now moving forward is going to be, where is UCF's next game going to be played? We don't know. Again, we're recording this at 9 a.m. Eastern on Thursday. So by the time you listen to this, maybe we will have the answers. And then maybe we'll have to do a special live show to break it down where UCF's play. But as of now, we don't know the bowl game. And perhaps part of that is because of the Cincinnati factor. We don't know if Cincinnati will make the playoff or not. They are ranked number 4 in this week's college football playoff rankings. They will play Houston for the conference championship game. 2 things on this, Drew. Number 1, I want to ask you this question because I've sensed there's a divide among UCF fans. There are some that are rooting against Cincinnati to make the playoff because they feel that they should have been the first team back in 2017 to be in. They don't want Cincinnati to get all the glory. Plus, they just don't want from a recruiting. They believe that's a recruiting advantage for Cincinnati to have over UCF going into the Big 12 together, that Cincinnati makes the playoffs and UCF doesn't. There are others that say, no, we're for it because from a business standpoint, it makes sense. Cincinnati is stronger. If Houston's strong and UCF's strong going to the Big 12, that's all good for all parties. Plus, if Cincinnati makes the playoff, that's more money for the American, which means more money for UCF. Cincinnati's gotten some good news. They kind of dodged a bullet this week. Luke Fickell, when Notre Dame, Brian Kelly shocked everybody and left Notre Dame for LSU. A lot of people thought maybe Luke Fickell goes to Cincinnati. Instead, Notre Dame will promote Marcus Freeman, their defense coordinator, the former Cincinnati defense coordinator. He will be the new head coach at Notre Dame. So Luke Fickell, once again, will stay at Cincinnati. Where do you stand on this whole thing? Is it good? If you're UCF a fan on Saturday, are you rooting for Cincinnati or are you rooting against them?
Oh, I'm 120% rooting for them. This isn't even close. Rooting against them is at this point just petty. It's petty and jealousy. But rooting for them is good for the American in the short term while UCF's still a member. It's good for the Big 12 because now, you have a television contract negotiation coming up that's going to be big. And we're talking not just going from $2 to $7 million. We're talking, perhaps 15 to 20. We're talking a much bigger range, a lot more dollars at stake here. For the long haul. This isn't going to be a case of, when UCF got the renewal in 2019, for the television deal, they were still looking to try to get out. Well, once they're in the Big 12, they're not going to be looking anywhere. Because there's nowhere to go. They've gotten into that P5 conference and there's, the ACC is not doing anything. So, that's going to be their home. So you want to have the most beneficial stuff going on, and to have a team in the playoffs, it goes a long way. The fact that Oklahoma and Texas are not in the conference championship game is good for the Big 12. Because for at this point, we as fans got to be thinking ahead towards the 2023 and beyond crew. The ones that are the remaining 8 and the new 4. I don't buy it at all into, I want them to lose because, we should have been first. Well, stop crying over spilled milk. It's over. It's years over. It's done. Move on. You have an eight-win team here who needs your support, and you know what? You have a conference that needs support, and anything that can boost their profile, you need it, because the Big 12 is being dogged. This new Big 12 as, oh, they're not really a power conference. You're just there. Well, how you prove otherwise? You do stuff like this. So you need Cincinnati to really step up and prove the doubters wrong. Get in the top 4. Heck, win a semifinal game. Go win a title. Imagine the positive vibes and notoriety that comes to the new Big 12. If you can say, hey, we got a team that just won a national title a couple of years ago, and they're part of us now. That goes a long way. We got to stop thinking just in the little bubble of UCF fandom and think big picture here. I guarantee you, the front office administration at UCF wants Cincinnati to win. They want the money in the short term. They want the potential more money in the long term. And Cincinnati would bring both of those to the table if they won, especially now that Luke Fickell's not going anywhere. And on an aside, has there been any other coaching rise that has been as fast as Marcus Freeman, who didn't even start coaching until 2010, and now he's going to be the head coach of Notre Dame? I mean, wow.
Fantastic. And I love the hire. I love Jack Swarbrick acting quickly. I like the move. I think Notre Dame is going to be just fine. I've always liked Marcus Freeman. I thought he did a great job here at Cincinnati defensively. We saw him up close, and I think it's a great move. And, I do. I think that's a great move. And I agree. That's a great point you made about the future TV contract. I think that is significant that UCF, Cincinnati, and Houston are strong when you get into your TV negotiations. You don't want a bunch of, struggling programs in there at that timing. Timing's is everything. So I agree with you 100%. Plus, we've done over 300 episodes here of the Banneret, and me and one of the most constant arguments me and Jeff have had about is, can a group of 5 team get into the playoff? I've said yes. He's said no. Here we are, Cincinnati, possibly a win away from making the playoffs, and I get to shut a lot of people up by Sunday.
They're tapping on that glass ceiling. Is it going to break or is it going to hold?
Probably.
We'll find out Sunday.
It's going to be. I think it's going to be a pretty dramatic Saturday, and I think it'll be very fascinating Sunday. Now, where this also affects UCF potentially is the bowl scenarios. You and I wrote our latest bowl predictions. It's on blackandgoldbanneret.com. I've got him going to Gasparilla. You've still got him going to Birmingham. There's been some rumors that Fenway is still in the mix for UCF. There's some rumors that the bowl, the Gasparilla is trying to make UCF in Florida, but Florida, I know this is a shock to some in our audience, would not to play UCF. I know that we've heard that before. There's been some rumors that UCF, if they play Gasparilla, will not be against Florida. It could be a South Carolina or somebody else from the SEC. Just kind of quick thoughts here, because I know we're both surprised we don't know as of this hour where they're going. We thought this would be out by now, but maybe not. Maybe we wait till the weekend, maybe not. What's your thoughts here on the UCF Bowl destination?
Well, I mean, it's really going to be one of those 3. And I think part of it is resting on what happens with Saturday. But, Houston being lower ranked than San Diego State, there's a question of, could San Diego State jump in and become the New Year's 6 representative of the G5? I think Houston will jump San Diego State should they beat Cincinnati. Hey, you just beat the top 4 team. You're going to bump up because they're only 3 spots apart from each other. And San Diego State's playing Utah State. So you're not getting nearly the strength of victory there. So I think it's winner take all of getting into the New Year's 6, which is a little bit of a surprise why things haven't quite shuffled out the way they have. But I guess there's still that concern of things kind of going sideways. Say Houston wins a squeaker and San Diego State, does a Ohio State and wins 59-0. Maybe enough to hold off a Cougar rally, and thus the Aztecs would take the spot, and then you have to reshuffle your whole bowl lineup. But the 2 that were announced made a lot of sense. Memphis to Hawaii, that one made a lot of sense. Once they lost to East Carolina, they were pretty much locked into that one. And then East Carolina, staying on the eastern seaboard, going to Myrtle Beach, also made perfect sense. At this point now, you'd think that UCF to Gasparilla would be very logical, but a lot of it's also the hook, the story. You're talking low to mid-tier bowls. You need something that sells. And you're looking at 6-6 teams from the SEC or the ACC, which are really what you're going to end up facing. That's why I picked Birmingham against Auburn. Massive story right there. You got a hook immediately. Auburn finishing 6-6 despite the close loss against Alabama in the Iron Bowl. Again, rivalry game, strange things happen. It becomes the best. That's actually the best story game right there. UCF Florida. Yeah, it's great for UCF fans, but no one else really cares. There's no real hook to it. And I'm a little surprised Florida is so adverse in this game. Talent-wise, they have better talent than UCF at this point. They just have nothing that holds it together. While UCF has less talent, but is much more of a cohesive unit. I go back to the Manhattan Jaspers over the Florida Gators in the NCAA tournament. Maybe that's why they're afraid, because we over me does carry some difference. But you're right. It could be a South Carolina, a Missouri. I don't think Tennessee is going to. I think they'll end up in a higher bowl since they've ended up with a 7th win over Vanderbilt. But it's all about the sell. I think Boston College will be in the Fenway Bowl against anyone, and doesn't matter. SMU, Houston, UCF, Fenway. There's no selling point to that. The only selling point is, hey, the local team's playing there. But I think there's room here for that UCF Auburn game in Birmingham. You've got a brand new stadium. Birmingham is the center of the college football universe for some reason, and that's a local game for the Tigers. It's while it's not, it's a 35,000 seat stadium. So you don't have to worry about it over, you're not going to get a huge sellout on a 6-6 Auburn team, but people will come. And so it's as opposed to, 60,000 plus in Tampa with a 6-6 SEC team, you can fill a 35,000 seat stadium with a 6-6 SEC team that, even though they're both in their own local state. I just think it's a better game. It's a better matchup. It's not that far away. It's a higher profile game. It's not a pre-Christmas game. Those tend to be looked down upon as kind of the weaker bowls. It's December 28th. I would be thrilled if UCF ended up in Birmingham.
We shall see. We will find out soon where UCF's destination is to conclude this first season of Gus Malzahn. If it'll be Gasparilla, will it be Birmingham or Fenway? That's probably going to be one of those 3 bowl games. Coming up on the Black and Gold Banneret, Jeff Sharon's interview with Todd Dagenais, UCF in the NCAA Tournament in Los Angeles. We'll hear from Coach Dagenais and his thoughts on that. Plus, Kyle Nash will join us later to talk about UCF men's basketball. There's some concerns following the Oklahoma and Auburn loss. That's all coming up on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. But before we do that, obviously, as we mentioned at the cold open here with Brian Murphy, we are tributing this show is a tribute to Otis Anderson. And one of the things we'll do on this show is give everybody a chance to speak about Otis Anderson. And Drew, I know you wanted to speak about Otis, so give me your 2 thoughts, because obviously when I think of Otis, we think of that 2 peace sign. So one of the things we'll do with the rest of the staff, give me your 2 thoughts that jumps to mind when you think of Otis Anderson.
Well, I remember his freshman year for the Peach Bowl. He was one of the guys in the interview and the group interviews. And while most media left to follow wherever Mackenzie Milton went, because he was in a different breakout session, I stayed and listened to Otis and Wyatt Miller and some other players. I think Traquan was one, maybe I think Jordan Akins was maybe the other one. But he was a freshman. And I asked a question of him, and I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, dealing with being young and handling the spotlight. And he gave this very mature, collected response that you don't expect it from a freshman, a true freshman. He definitely came off as older, wiser than his years, definitely older than he appeared, very poised and very polite. And, I love the fact that answer actually made his highlight reel from that season. which, made me feel kind of good too. But, you look at the fan interactions that he's had. He was just class all around in a good way. It was just a nice, humble kid who had the world in front of him. And, you become a fan favorite not only by excelling on the field, but excelling off the field. And personality goes a long way. You gain team favorites that way by guys who interact with the masses. He's not too, his ego wasn't too big to get away from taking pictures with fans. I mean, he was everywhere. If a fan wanted a picture, he was in for it. It's very, very refreshing to see, these young players and especially Otis, doing this stuff. They don't have to spend time with the fans. They can do the minimum and just get away, but he wasn't about the minimum. There was nothing minimum about him. And obviously, we've been robbed of a treasure of a person. And, it's sad. It's enraging when you think about the circumstances behind it. And obviously we have to now wait and see how the system works out. But, we lost a treasure. And, you don't know how the team or the fans are going to move on from this. But, he's touched a lot of people. Rock'em Socks put 500 pairs of socks that they made specifically for him with his name on it and his Deuces sign. And we're donating the proceeds to his mother, who did, survive with minimal injuries. But she's going to make it. They sold out, and according to Jason Beatty, the Orlando Sentinel, in 13 hours. So that was 500 pairs right there. Maybe they'll do another run. But I mean, that just shows how much the fans and the world care about him. They've got GoFundMe's going on to donate money to his mom to help, with costs and everything. And they've raised thousands of dollars. It just shows the love that Knight Nation has for Otis. And, you've had other teams, fans from South Florida, the Los Angeles Rams, other schools coming out and saying, hey, we support UCF and their fans right now because they're going through a tough spot. This is hard to reconcile. When you think about what happened and why, it's very hard to reconcile. And I think that's taken a larger emotional toll on the general public, just because it's hard to understand what would drive someone to do what they did and the thought process that goes with it. And I'm sure we'll learn more as the system works. But it's really hard to process, and it's really hard to reconcile and rationalize, because it doesn't come off as rational at all. And that creates a lot more mental and emotional anguish that needs to go somewhere. Internalizing is not a good thing. It's very damaging. So, a lot of fans are talking online. There was a memorial set up in the stadium, and a few people went to it. On the 2-yard line. There's been fundraising. It gives fans and the general public a way of doing something to try and give themselves a feeling of peace. Because anyone who's a parent, myself included, this hits harder because we're talking a family incident, and that makes it even harder to rationalize because I can't fathom doing something to my own child. So a lot of other parents are thinking the same thing, like, how does this happen? And so it needs to go somewhere. And if it goes nowhere, bad things happen. So they got to find somewhere to go. But, the community at large has been very supportive. Fans want to do more, and we'll see what comes from that. There's been calls for helmet stickers or patches or something to just honor him. And, that would be really cool. You do that for players like that, especially in situations, to show that, he mattered. And he did. Otis mattered, and he still matters. And, we lost a good one. We really did.
We definitely did. I'm one that's made an impact that will last forever here at UCF. Well said, Andrew. Well said. We'll have more of the Black and Gold Banneret podcast after this.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.
Welcome back here to the Black and Gold Banneret podcast. Well, UCF Volleyball, of course, making their fourth straight NCAA Tournament appearance, fifth under head coach Todd Dagenais. They found out on Sunday night where they would be going. UCF will be heading to Los Angeles. First time since 1997 in a normal NCAA Tournament year. Of course, that UCF will be outside the state of Florida for the NCAA Tournament. They will be open up against Pepperdine on Friday night at 7:30. Of course, for Todd Dagenais, he was named American Coach of the Year on Tuesday. Back-to-back years for him. And he's built this program now to make it as he takes this program to his fifth time into the NCAA Tournament. Of course, it's kind of full circle for Todd Dagenais. When he was hired to be the head coach at UCF in 2008, he came over from USC when he was the assistant coach under US legendary head coach Mick Haley. Jeff Sharon spoke to Todd Dagenais on Monday prior to Jeff having surgery and prior to Todd and UCF traveling out west to Los Angeles. Here is Jeff's conversation with Todd Dagenais on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast.
Jeff Sharon along with you here, and it is NCAA tournament time for UCF Volleyball. They are in for the fourth consecutive time as four-time running American Athletic Conference champions. And joining me now, their head coach, Todd Dagenais, fresh off of the selection show party on Sunday, which immediately followed his Green Bay Packers victory over the LA Rams. And lo and behold, you're going to LA too, Todd. So congratulations, first of all.
It is. It's exciting to go back to, where I came here from was LA. Now it's not USC, but I've had many good memories inside Pauley Pavilion, and hopefully we have our chance to have more.
I was going to say you're treading on hostile ground once again, heading into Pauley Pavilion after your previous stop in your career at Southern Cal. What was your favorite memory in Pauley Pavilion of some of the matches that you won as an assistant there?
Well, I'll tell you, we had one match where the entire men's swim and water polo team showed up in their Speedos, sat in the front row, and those bleachers were right up against where we serve. And so our players would have to go back and serve, let's just say, very close to people right behind them standing up in their Speedos. And they shouted things and they said things, and it was not the most family-friendly environment. And you won anyway. We pulled it out.
Right. Well, let's talk about this first round. All right, so this is unusual. All right, so here's a little stat Eric Lopez gave to me. 5 of the last 7 times UCF Volleyball has made the NCAA tournament, you've been shipped to Gainesville. All right. The other 2 times were when you hosted in 2018, and then, of course, last year when the whole tournament was in Omaha, Nebraska because of COVID. But not this time. They ship you out to Los Angeles. Tough road trip?
Tough road trip. No doubt about it. You're dealing with the time zone change. And then once you get there, you're dealing with 2 national championship level teams plus Fairfield. I don't know much about them, but we have to deal with Pepperdine first. And that is a national championship Final Four experienced team. And then should we get through and should UCLA take care of Fairfield, now we're playing another multi-time national champion. So the competition is going to be tough. We're playing well. I like where we are. I like our ability to bring our best product to the floor out there. And that's all you can really hope for. But Yeah, it's so tough that we're actually leaving tomorrow night. We'll get a practice in. We'll leave Tuesday night.
Well, you're doing a red eye out there?
No, it's just an evening flight. We'll practice right after we practice. We'll head out and kind of get settled in, and then we will train at the U.S. Olympic Training Center for a day. Karch Karai, the national team coach, was kind enough to set that up for us. So we'll get a training block in there on Wednesday. That'll be, I guess, an unofficial practice, right? And then we get an official practice on Thursday inside Pauley, and then off we go on Friday.
So I want to talk a little bit more about Pepperdine, your first round opponent. They finished the season 22-5. They were third in the West Coast Conference. BYU won the conference and beat Pepperdine twice this year. But this is no slouch of a team either. Their RPI is 37. You guys are 25. Scott Wong has been there for 7 years and has a career record of 125 and 75. And this is a very good offensive team. They're right there neck and neck with you in the offensive statistics. In terms of the NCAA, 31st in kills per set, 42nd in hit percentage as a team. What are the challenges that they bring to, or you guys, I should correct myself, are 22nd in the final RPI. What are the challenges that they bring to you from a matchup perspective?
Well, I think, first of all, they're at home. That in itself is a matchup advantage. A lot of those California players grow up playing volleyball since they're 5 years old. And the team is loaded with high IQ, great volleyball players. And so, that's going to be a challenge because they're going to bring a high level IQ to the floor. Now, we certainly have players that can do that as well. But a lot of these kids have been playing volleyball since they're 5 years old, on the beach, indoor, wherever, they can play. Volleyball, obviously in California, it's a lifestyle. It's, like soccer is to England and Great Britain. So that's going to be a challenge. Other than that, it's going to come down to who is able to run their offense. And how do you do that? You win the passing game. We got to win the passing game against these guys. And that's really going to be a goal, is that we have to be better than them in passing so we can run our offense. Whichever team runs their offense better is going to win this match. So it's going to be a big serve pass battle, as most volleyball matches are, but this one is going to be exceptionally strong because I think both teams can pass really well. And I think both teams have their moments where they struggle. And I think the team that can get comfortable and play right from the opening whistle is the team that's going to have the best chance.
I think one of the fun parts about this matchup is seeing, even though they're not going to be going actually really head to head, but the two best outside hitters for these two squads. Obviously, we know, what can we possibly say about McKenna Melville, who announced, she and Amber Olsen announced that they're coming back next year for their final year as super seniors. So I know you're happy about that. McKenna, 7th in the country in kills per set, and she's facing, and you're facing Rachel Aarons from Pepperdine, who is top 10, or who's 10th in the country in that same statistic. So it's kind of like a mirror image, right? I mean,
I look at the teams on paper, and you could take the names off of, the top of the paper, and it'd be really close. It's a coin flip. It's two teams that are almost exactly the same. Now, they're better at different things or in different areas than the other. Each team has their own advantages, but if you look at the bottom line, points per set, the important categories, both teams are just about the same. It's going to be a wonderful matchup for us. We're going to have to go out there and we're going to have to bring our brand of volleyball a long distance and hope it works out for us.
Take me behind the curtain a little bit here and tell me about, not just, we can talk about on the floor stuff, it is what it is at this point, but the amount of logistical preparation that you and your staff have to go through in order to prepare for a trip like this. It's different than going to Gainesville, obviously different than staying at home if you had the chance to host, but what's some of the extra work that you and your staff have to do to get this trip ready and your team ready to be focused for that match on Friday night?
Yeah, the tough thing was we immediately went to work last night, because anytime you're traveling that far, trying to find flights, trying to find practice time, you're trying to make it so it's not so condensed and causes anxiety. And that's why we're going out on Tuesday. We were right at work, and we were in the office till close to midnight, and I'm sure Brian and Jenny were on film till well into the morning just to get kind of a skeleton report. And then we'll keep adding to it as we go. We'll probably be adding to it on the airplane. And then once we land there, before we finalize anything.
Oh, you're paying for the Wi-Fi on that flight, aren't you?
There's no doubt.
Do you guys on a trip like that, do you set aside time to have some fun out there in Los Angeles?
I'd really like to. Going out there the extra day might give us a little bit of time. Maybe we'll get to go see a beach or something like that. But no, these things with all the homework, the tests, and everything that we have to worry about off the court, and rest and nutrition, strength and conditioning, there's just not going to be a lot of time. With myself and TJ having been out there, TJ's from there, there's a lot of things we'd love them to see and do, but something like this, you don't have any time. It seems like you have all the time in the world, but you really don't have any time to move a group of 22 people around that fast.
Not to look ahead too much, but assuming you get through this extremely difficult Pepperdine match, and we've talked about that, obviously, likely second round matchup with UCLA. What do we know about the Bruins this year? I know that they came in, they were this close to winning the Pac-12 title. It came down to that last regular season match against USC, and they lost in 5, and that handed the Pac-12 title to Washington. So quick scouting report on them as far as what you know.
I'm going to answer your question with a short and a long answer. The short answer is UCLA is really, really good. And the long answer is I don't even want to think about UCLA for a very long time.
You will not let me get anything out of you.
We'll think about UCLA if the time is right. But no, I'm not, because Pepperdine is not your typical first round matchup.
Right.
It's not like we're playing some 300 RPI team. They're just behind us. And so it's a coin flip. And if we don't give every ounce of energy to Pepperdine, there is no bother looking at anybody else. So UCLA is really, 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 really good. That's all I know.
One last word on McKenna and Amber coming back. I know how happy you are to see them finish up. McKenna talked about how she wants to be a teacher. And, obviously we know about her mom, Kathy Gillen, being a coach and being in education. And I think you've always fashioned yourself as an educator really first. How happy are you to know that they're coming back and to know that they want to finish the deal here?
The fact that you have a potential setter of the year for the conference and a potential player of the year for the conference coming back, I don't know if I have words to contain or say how excited I am about having those two come back, leading the core group that we have remaining and the group that's going to be coming in. So, when we went through senior night and they said, well, we're just going to hold out, I think they were kind of waiting to evaluate their lives. And I'm glad that whatever it was, they evaluated and decided it was a good time to come back for one more year. I'm sure the conference is not going to be very happy about that, but we are.
Bad. Well, listen, it's been what a year it's been for you guys. Yet again, 4 straight trips to the NCAA tournament, 4 consecutive American Athletic Conference championships, and my favorite statistic that we keep counting, 74, I've lost count now, 74, I believe, of the last 78 against American Athletic Conference opponents. But you won't be playing anyone in the conference here. It's irregular competition in the NCAA tournament. Todd, safe travels out there. Good luck and stay healthy with the preparation. And we will be seeing you on Friday night. Match time is already set, by the way. They helped you out with that match time, by the way, 7:30 Eastern.
7:30 Eastern time. Yeah, we actually caught a break on that one.
Yeah, they're not starting you up at 10 o'clock.
No, we don't. It's not 10 o'clock. We're going to be playing right in a sweet spot for us. So I like that. I think it's going to serve us well.
All right. UCF against Pepperdine in the NCAA first rounds at Pauley Pavilion at UCLA. UCF fans out in Los Angeles, you have officially been put on notice to be at Pauley Pavilion on Friday, December 3rd, 7:30 Eastern. That's 4:30. I had to do math real quick. 4:30 Pacific time at Pauley Pavilion to see your Knights take on the Waves in the first round of the NCAA tournament. Todd Dagenais,
I'll tell you what, I'll do this, okay, Jeff, before you sign off.
Okay.
I get 6 tickets. If there's 6 fans out in LA, the first ones to contact me by my email, they will get those 6 tickets to go watch that match.
Ooh, okay.
I just have to look up my email on the
internet
staff
sleuths
directory.
have to find Todd's email now.
Find my email and prove that you're from LA, and I will get you a ticket until I run out.
Awesome. All right. It's a shame I'm not out there right now. I'd take you up on that. Todd Dagenais, head coach UCF Volleyball. Todd, good luck on Friday. Good luck during the weekend. Have fun out there. I hope you see some old friends and bring home a couple W's. What do you say?
That'll be nice. Thank you very much, Jeff, for all the support this year.
And thanks again to Coach Dagenais for taking a few minutes of his busy schedule, obviously, to talk to Jeff. That was recorded on Monday. That interview. Joining me now is our very own Bryson Turner. And Bryson, you've covered this team the whole year. I mentioned Todd was named Coach of the Year, but this has been a historic season, and that continued on Tuesday with the awards, didn't it?
Oh, yes, indeed it did. For one, McKenna Melville got the Player of the Year award back-to-back in the American Athletic Conference, which is very well deserved. And if I remember right, I believe it is the first time ever in the American a back-to-back Player of the Year has happened.
Well, Jordan Thompson has won it multiple times. It's the first time a UCF player, by the way, has ever won it twice in any conference. Yeah.
UCF player, there you are. And then Amber Olsen just won Setter of the Year. And what's awesome, both of those two are coming back. So that is very exciting to see, especially after receiving that news. And then we have 4 selections for the all-conference first team, the first time that's ever happened in program history. McKenna Melville and Anne-Marie Watson, both unanimous selections, along with Amber Olsen and Claudia Dillon. That was the one I was forgetting. And then on the second team, they selected Narissa Moravec.
Amazing, talented team. You mentioned McKenna Melville. Your feature, Know Your Night on McKenna, is out right now on blackandgoldbanneret.com. I strongly encourage it, as we got to talk to Jordan Pingle. We have thoughts from Jordan Pingle, the great libero, future Hall of Famer who played for McKenna in McKenna's freshman year in 2018, part of that great team that hosted in 2018. You got a chance to talk to associate head coach Jenny Maurer at the watch party on Sunday night, who recruited McKenna. Obviously, you have comments from Todd Dagenais. Just give the audience kind of a taste of what they can expect on your feature on McKenna. What did you learn from doing that feature on McKenna?
Well, I think the biggest thing that I learned about McKenna is just how much of a I guess role model and leader, or really just a player coach that she almost is. We already knew that she grew up with her mom, and who is a very well decorated high school volleyball coach in the state of Minnesota. But I think that what this feature does, because we never actually talked to her mother for this story, and instead I focused a little more on just the dynamic that Melville brings to the team. And I think it was really, really interesting about what everybody had to say about her. And I think it really shows just how much McKenna means to this team. And I think when you read it, I think you'll be just as excited, if not more so than I am, about the prospect of her coming back next season.
You mentioned her coming back. That was announced Sunday night. McKenna Melville and Amber Olsen announcing at the watch party that was held at Burger U that they will be back for a next extra year. Talk about the significance of that, because they're going to be the favorites to win the American again next year. And both of them are chasing records now that are now very attainable.
Oh, yes, that is for sure. McKenna Melville is 204, if I am not mistaken. Let me double check. Yes, she is. She is 204 kills away from the all-time kills record. She recently passed Tyra Harper for second in the Houston match, and now she's 204 kills away from Renata Menchikova. And considering how many kills she gets in a season, barring any unforeseen injury, I foresee her passing that 200 kills total sometime next season, perhaps in late September, maybe. That would be my forecast, late September-ish. Seeing if you can think about how many kills she normally gets in a match, she's also a fourth all time on the career digs list. She's quite a ways off from third place. So we'll see where she ends up there, but she'll certainly be able to increase her total there as well. And then Amber Olsen is fourth all time in career assists, so she will be able to ascend that list as well. But considering that these two, they're both part of the same recruiting class by associate head coach Jenny Maurer. So I feel like these two players seem to have this really good dynamic going with each other. And so the fact that they're both coming back next season together, I think is very, very key for the UCF offense. And I think that allows for some very nice continuity in that department going forward. That way, all the most that Coach Dagenais and the staff have to worry about is replacing the defense that you get from Anne-Marie Watson and Narissa Marabe.
Speaking of Anne-Marie Watson, you did a feature on Anne-Marie Watson early in the season. I encourage people to check that out as well. In fact, Bryson, we'll post that on Twitter leading up to the big match Friday, UCF against Pepperdine, 7:30. Let's talk about this. I wish
I could pin two tweets right? To my Twitter account for that, because I love both of those articles. And speaking of Anne-Marie Watson, she's recently gotten into the top 10 all time in kills now. Yeah. So if you could, seriously, like if McKenna, I feel I'm really glad that we did that, because McKenna Melville being on this team, being the leading leader in the country in kills is one thing, but then you get Anne-Marie Watson on here, who is not only one of the best blockers, but now is showing to be one of the best in kills as well. I mean, this team is great. I could just gush about it all day.
So they will be headed to Los Angeles, as we talked about. They will open with Pepperdine, who's kind of been flirting with the top 25 throughout the season, although many people believe the volleyball polls are kind of a joke. Anyway, they're RPI in the 30s. They're making their 25th NCAA tournament trip into the field. UCLA is the national seed here. They're the 13th seed. They're the host. They'll play Fairfield. UCF Pepperdine, 7:30 Eastern Friday. First round match. If they win, they play second round Saturday around 10 o'clock Eastern. This is the thing I'm fascinated about here, Bryson, about this bracket. I mentioned the first part, which is Todd returning back to Los Angeles. He was an assistant at USC for 3 years under legendary head coach, national champion head coach Mick Haley, before coming to UCF to be the head coach. That's fascinating to me. Number two, you've got three of the best offensive players in this little bracket right here. Obviously, McKenna, as we talked, number one in the NCAA in kills for the season, as well as points for the season. She's been fantastic all year. Should be a first or second team All-American when they announced that here in the middle of December during Final Four week deal. But she's not the only great offensive player in this deal. You got Rachel Ahrens of Pepperdine, who ranks 10th in the country in kills per set, 4.79. McKenna, for example, is 7th in the country in kills per set, 4.98. Rachel's 12th in points and then as well as Kills. That's going to be a phenomenal matchup on Friday night. Rachel Aarons against McKenna Melville. Not sure we could find a better first-round matchup of two of the best offensive players in the opening round than those two. And then Mac May of UCLA, who ranks 11th in points, as well as kills per set with 4.76 and kills as well. We got 3 of the top 12 top offensive players in the country in this little bracket here. This is going to be a lot of fun, I think, Bryson.
Oh, I agree. I'm looking at the season kills list, though. So McKenna Melville has 578 kills leading the country. Mac May is in 10th with 495.
Yep.
And then Rachel Aarons is in 16th with 484. So, I mean, when you look at the raw kills total, there is a massive gap between Melville and the other two. And this tells me a couple of things. One of two things is going to need to happen. One, Melville needs to absolutely go off in this game. Or two, and this is something that that may have been a little overshadowed, but I did talk about a little bit earlier in the season, is that on the offensive side, they need to make sure that McKenna isn't on an island. I mean,
got to get balance offense.
Yes, exactly. Amory Watson has been great in kills this season. I imagine we could see something very good out of her. I think the blocking certainly needs to be on point. That is always very, very helpful. So Watson and Moravec. I think Amory Watson, like, people talk about McKenna Melville, but to be completely honest, Amory Watson, I think, is one of the biggest key players on this team on both sides of the ball. And so I think that people, when they scheme for McKenna, they might overlook Anne-Marie. And so I think that we could possibly see a really good game out of her. But other than that, I also think we should definitely want to keep an eye on the defensive specialists, Chloe Shear and Caitlin Grimes. These two young players have been doing very well this season in digs and in the backcourt. And so I definitely want to make sure we keep an eye on them, because, they don't exactly have as much experience as the others in this tournament environment. Chloe Shear is a sophomore, so she has been to Omaha, but this is a little different than that. And Caitlin Grimes is a freshman. So hopefully the team will be able to help them acclimate to that environment. But I think that is also something to watch for as well. So while McKenna is obviously going to take a lot of the headlines here, there's a lot to talk about with this team, and I'm sure that they're focusing on scheming against Rachel Aarons right now.
Good draw. I like the fact they're out west. I know, my thing is they didn't get sent to Gainesville like they normally, typically UCF teams do in these type of Olympic sports postseasons. I like the fact that volleyball didn't try to squish in. I think 6 teams in the state of Florida made the tournament. They didn't try to bunch them in all together. I thought that was very positive. And like I said, I'd rather be at a place like UCLA that's opposed to a Big Ten place like Wisconsin, who they could face in the Supers, in the Sweet 16, I should say, or places like Minnesota, Big Ten places that would have been a big environment challenge, Nebraska and all those places. I think they feel comfortable. They have been through this before. Should be a lot of fun. UCLA will stream these matches on their site, I think, and you'll have more details on that at UCFnights.com. For more details, and we'll be covering UCF volleyball obviously from here until the postseason. We'll have it on Black Eagle Better It. Myself and Bryson will be covering that every angle with the first match Friday night against Pepperdine. But this is a big opportunity here. Obviously you had they had the tough loss against High Point in the spring in the first round. This is a team that, as you know, Bryson, been around them. They got bigger goals. They got big goals. They want to make a deep run. They want to be that first team in Division I era to make it past the second round, and they have the roster to do it. Now it's just now about performing, and I think they've been waiting for this for a while.
Oh yeah, I think that honestly the expectations going in to this the NCAA tournament is not completely unfounded, because when you look at the roster of this team, in my opinion, it's one of the most complete teams this program has ever had since the 90s. And so the fact is that I think that especially after last season with the loss to High Point, I think that Coach Dagenais and Dagenais and team really want to get this monkey off their backs and get farther than at least the first round.
The business trip, right? It's a business trip, as you mentioned it. So yeah,
right.
No,
so I would say I do like the draw. I think it's certainly nice that we don't have to deal with Florida all over again, because let's be honest, Florida has been more a volleyball state than it's been a football state this fall. And then looking at Pepperdine. I'm just been taking a look at some of their stats on them, and they've actually given up less kills than UCF has this season. So I definitely want to keep an eye on that Pepperdine defense a little bit. But UCF has gotten more kills than Pepperdine has. So I think it'll be very interesting to see the dynamic between this UCF offense and Pepperdine defense. But I would also argue that that any disparity that the UCF defense needs to make sure that they can respond in kind to the Pepperdine defense and be sure to neutralize and kills from people and those like Rachel Aarons. Or they might put McKenna Melville on her. They put McKenna Melville like defensively on Michelle Wolf in the SMU game, and she was a first team All-American All-American, so you know that she's no slouch. And in that SMU match, she still got a double-double. So I would say, I could possibly see McKenna Melville being put on Rachel Aarons defensively.
We'll see.
Which I think emphasizes the importance of everybody else to contribute offensively, because if Melville's busy defending Aarons, then she might not have the opportunity to get like 30 kills or something.
We'll see how that goes. Should be fun. We'll be following that very closely. Let's get into a couple other items, because there's some big news. You mentioned UCLA, of course. UCLA women's soccer head coach Amanda Cromwell, former UCF head coach, legendary UCF head coach, future UCF Hall of Famer Amanda Cromwell, in the news, reports out there from soccer outlets that she's going to leave UCLA and become the new head coach of the Orlando Pride of the NWSL here, coming back to Central Florida. Pretty blockbuster news here that affects the college game and the pro game. But Bryson, this is huge. Amanda Cromwell could be back in Central Florida coaching the pro team and be nearby UCF once again.
Oh, yes. I am very excited to see that Cromwell is essentially coming home almost. I know. I heard that there was bring Cromwell back or something like that, but no. But hey, I think this is the best you're gonna get from that perspective, and I think it's definitely a good move for the Pride. The Pride have been a very high profile team with people with players like Alex Morgan on their roster, and so bringing in Amanda Cromwell, who has had a very, very solid track record with UCF, especially again, UCF women's soccer has been very big with goalkeepers, and so I think bringing in Amanda Cromwell, I could imagine Cromwell really helping improving the Orlando Pride goalkeeping, because if there's one thing that she will have learned,
especially if she brings in her longtime goalkeeper coach that UCF, Donna Pfister, is a part of that. We don't know that. That's just speculation on that. Couple things. It's worth pointing out. Cromwell and Tiffany Roberts-Zahedek were teammates. They played together on the U.S. national team. It is also worth pointing out Amanda was at Tiffany Roberts-Zahedek's introduction press conference when she was announced as the head coach when Cromwell left UCF to go to UCLA. So as I understand, they have a good relationship, and I think they're gonna be fine on that. So that's one thing.
I would say keep an eye out if any of the UCF women's soccer players decide to go pro. Keep an eye on the Orlando Pride.
That's what I'm saying. Right. I think that's a valid point. That could become a pipeline for sure. The second thing, and talking to people that are in the know when it comes to this, I think some of the motivation behind this is Amanda Cromwell, I think, has done everything she could do at UCLA. And I think her goal, or one remaining goal, is to become the next U.S. national head coach of the women's national team. I think that is something that she is trying to shoot for. And I think in talking to some people, adding this to your resume, being a pro head coach alongside being a college head coach experience will help her take that next step and be possibly in position to take over and be the next U.S. women's national head coach for maybe either the next Women's World Cup cycle or after that. I think that's the long-term goal here for Coach Cromwell. Plus, she obviously has an affection for the pro game and wants to help it grow. And I think Orlando, she likes Orlando a lot. I think it's a great move for the Pride. I think it should help them from an interest standpoint locally. It's very interesting because Becky, the Florida longtime head coach, was the interim head coach this past season for them. Now it's Cromwell that will take over. So according to the report, so very interesting news out of the soccer world from that standpoint. And think of the coaches we're going to have in town with Cromwell, and then obviously Teff, and then of course Scott Calabrese over on the men's side. And of course the men's side, big offseason questions where they're going to call home in a couple of years. So that's the big story in soccer. Softball.
Kerem Hajar called it a football schools. You know, he loves soccer, and so I never underestimate UCF soccer because there is definitely a lot to like. And
I would expect Cromwell to get honored at some point by UCF, as I mentioned, whether it be in the Hall of Fame, which I think now is definitely much more wide open because she's not coaching during the college season. Plus, she's right around town, and I think she'll be honored at the game at some point, probably 2022, 2023.
Isn't the waiting period for a coach 10 years, if I'm not mistaken?
There's not been concrete answers about that because remember George O'Leary got in under that. So I think Amanda could be eligible as soon as 2022. I was told by sources that she came this close to making it in 2019 class. So I would not be surprised if she's one of the faces, one of the main player people to be inducted part of that 22 class, but that's a long ways away. So we'll see. But again, Amanda Cromwell looks like it'll be going to town. Let me switch over to softball real quick because there's a couple big news items from a softball standpoint. The schedule came out for UCF softball on Wednesday.
7 p.m. I'm really loving this drop time for UCF athletics.
Hey, at least it gives us a heads up. They will open the season against Georgia, who made the Women's College World Series. That's going to be a big national game, which, knock on wood, I will have the honor to call on ESPN Plus. Full disclosures, I enter year 15 of calling UCF softball, hopefully, knock on wood. But they're going to open with Georgia on Thursday, February 10th. That's significant. Georgia was a Women's College World Series team. That'll be the first game by the new head coach, Tony Baldwin of Georgia, taking over for the legendary Lou Harris-Champer, who retired. Baldwin and Coach Cindy Balmalone coached together on the U.S. national team under 19 team that won the gold in 2019. UCF will face 16 teams that make the NCAA tournament, 3 teams that made the Women's College World Series, Georgia being among them. Minnesota will be there here opening weekend, Fresno State, Longwood. They will be playing at ESPN at the St. Pete Clearwater Elite Invitational, which is a big ESPN televised tournament. Wisconsin, Michigan, Texas Tech, Tennessee, and Texas at Florida State. Whoa. The Wisconsin game on February 17th will be on ESPNU. Michigan and Texas Tech, ESPN Plus. Tennessee, ESPN Plus. Texas will be on the Longhorn Network. Florida State and ESPN Plus. Other highlights of the schedule: James Madison, Florida, Ole Miss come to the complex on the weekend of the 25th for a tournament. South Carolina comes in for a tournament on March 4th. UCF will go on a long West Coast trip. They'll play at Pacific. What's noteworthy about that is Cindy Balmalone's alma mater. She's the greatest player ever at Pacific. Her number is retired. This will be the first time she is at Pacific as a head coach, facing her mentor, Brian Cozy, who's in his 30th season at Pacific. That'll be March 8th. They'll play Iowa State, NCAA tournament team, Nebraska traditional program as well. Conference play will begin March 25th in Tampa against South Florida. So the rivalry will be the first weekend right off the bat. Virginia Tech, who figures to be a top 10, top 15 team, will come here for Sunday, April 3rd and Monday, April 4th for a 3-game series. You can check out the entire schedule on UCFKnights.com. Bryson, your thoughts, questions you have about the schedule?
Well, I think that this schedule by Coach Cindy Ball Malone is very, very, very intriguing. And one thing I'm actually noticing is that aside from conference matches, every single match here is in the state of Florida that is not a conference match. And I think that certainly is a great job. Is certainly
outside the California trip too.
Aside the California tournament, right. Aside from the California tournament, which I mean, you basically knock out most of your away non-conference matches all in one go, which I think is certainly a solid move there. I think, and maybe you're more familiar with softball than I am, Eric, but I just want to see because this it seems like they're going to go through a big gauntlet of a schedule where they just play game day after day after day after day. I mean, with baseball, at least with last season, they had the series format where they played 4 games in the span of three days, but you had a few days to rest before the week. Not so here too much of the time with softball. For example, they play a double header against South Carolina and FGCU on March 5th. March 6th, they play FGCU. They have a day's rest before they go out to California to play. Then they have a day's rest before they go out to California to play Pacific and Fresno State. 2 days later, they go to Boston. They go to Long Beach for the Judy Garmon Classic, and then they only have a day to fly back to Orlando to take on Ohio State on March 15th. So can you just kind of talk to me about about this sort of thing, and does that present any concerns for you?
No, they did the same thing a couple years ago, 2020, before the season shut down. They go on a West Coast trip. The reason you're doing that for resume purposes, schedule strength, RPI, quality of opponents. I think the key there is you kind of build a bond too within the team, build the chemistry. It's a tough, quick turnaround, but they had success on the West Coast 2 years ago. So I actually am not as concerned about that. I'm more concerned about the strength of the schedule. It is going to be a gauntlet. That Clearwater tournament in particular, there are no gimmies there. So I think you're going to learn a lot about this team. You might see some bumps on the road, no pun intended. But I think I've talked to people, players on the roster. I think they feel this is the most talented roster they've had, more talented than last year, which kind of surprised me when I heard that. But it's young. There's a lot of young, super talented players. So we'll see how they handle that schedule deal. By the way, another note, one of the star players to get used to this name, Jada Cody, is one of the 45 players in the country to be invited to the U.S. national team trials that will take place in Vero Beach, Florida, January 1st through the 6th. She's one of 45 players trying to make the U.S. national team in 2022 for international competition. She's the first UCF player ever to be invited to the U.S. national trials. They do this every year because they play, even in non-Olympic years, they play in major tournaments across the world during the summer, and they usually do tryouts in January. So this is a big, big accomplishment for Jada to be a part of that. She's a starter at third base, could play catcher as well. I think versatility will give her a chance to make this team. But even if she doesn't, still just to be invited is a huge compliment and should give her a lot of confidence going into 2022.
Speaking of which, with 2022, I actually there's some softball news that broke yesterday that I wanted to see a reaction on. The Knights recently signed a two-way player from Naples High, Macy Miles. I don't know how much you follow the high school softball recruiting scene, right? But have you heard about that and like any reaction?
I did. What I can tell you, I don't follow the high school landscape and all that on a close base, but I can tell you that outlets that cover the recruiting aspect, this recruiting class that UCF's going to have for the players that will enroll in the fall of 22 is the 25th best class in the country. In fact, this is the second year in a row UCF has had a top 25 recruiting class coming in. So the recruiting has picked up, to your point, and will probably continue to pick up. And I don't think it's an accident, Bryson, that this comes at the news with UCF knowing they're going to be going to the Big 12 in the future, probably from a softball standpoint. the spring of 24 is when they would start the first season in the Big 12, because the Big 12 is a super strong conference in softball, and that's even with the departures of Oklahoma and Texas. They will still be a top 4, top 5 league with the additions of UCF and Houston and BYU to that league to go alongside Oklahoma States and the Baylors and the Iowa State. So I think you're starting to see some of the impact of UCF moving to the Big 12, helping these sports, especially in the Olympic sports, from a recruiting standpoint.
So now we have confirmation of the fact that the American Athletic Conference Championship game is going to be played in Greenville, North Carolina, and just 4 days after the Knights play a 3-game series in Wichita, Kansas against the Shockers.
Yeah, and this is remember UCF was originally supposed to host the conference tournament, and usually what happens is the team that hosts gets sent on the road. Well, obviously UCF was taken away from them as far as hosting because they're moving to the Big 12. It's now in Greenville, and this is a tough stretch to your point. Wichita State, probably UCF and Wichita and South Florida are going to be your 3 favorites in the American to battle for the regular season championship. UCF's got to go to Wichita. That is a brutal place to play. It's a very friendly offensive park. And then it's a tough place from a traveling standpoint. Now, because they're not hosting, they got to go from Wichita back to Orlando and then quick turnaround, travel to Raleigh to Greenville, which means they got to probably fly into Raleigh, then bus to Greenville. I've done that trip. Not an easy trip. This really hurts them at the end of the year. Whereas the original plan was they go to Wichita, then just come home to host a tournament. Now they got to go back-to-back weeks in the tournament. That's going to hurt them come the conference tournament. That's going to put them behind the 8 ball a little bit. But, that's unfortunate. That's the way it goes. At least UCF will be allowed to play in the conference tournament, unlike the Colonial, which banned James Madison from playing in conference tournaments because they're moving to the Sun Belt. So it could be worse, but it is disappointing. That's the rippling effect of that decision. I think it's petty, but it's not going to change. And, they'll deal with it. And that's the one thing about the conference schedule you bring up. UCF's got to go to South Florida. They got to go to Wichita State. Those are their 2 main threats for the American Conference Championship. So tough conference schedule from that standpoint to go alongside the tough non-conference schedule. Maybe the toughest one yet that Coach Ball Malone has put together. And that's saying something because that 2020 schedule in particular was absolutely brutal schedule, tough. But the beauty of it is, if you recalled, before the world came to an end in 2020 in March, UCF's RPI was in the top 10, and they were winning games. That's the beauty of playing a tough non-conference schedule and playing a tough schedule overall is you benefit from that. If you win some of those games, you're going to be rated very high in the RPI and then put yourself in position to get a high seed, maybe even host as a possibility, and obviously get you ready for conference play. So,
you speak of James Madison, and James Madison's coming to town on February 26th. So that should certainly be interesting. Maybe playing with a little bit of chip on their shoulder for them there. Also, one game that I'm seeing on here that I definitely would like to see is going to be a grudge match with Florida State in Clearwater.
Rematch of the regional final in Tallahassee. Interesting that they'll play in Clearwater, not in Tallahassee or Orlando. I believe it might be the first time those 2 programs have played in a neutral field. That's going to be real packed at Eddie C. Moore Stadium, week 2 of the season. So we'll have more softball talk come spring when we get closer to the season. I can't wait for that. Coming up on the Black and Gold Banneret podcast, we're going to wrap it up with UCF basketball talk with Kyle Nash. Do we have reasons to be concerned about the men's team following the loss to Auburn, and the women's team get set to go on a long road trip after their home game against Arkansas? But before we get to that, Bryson, obviously a very difficult week, as we've talked about this whole episode's tribute to Otis Anderson. I want you to kind of, as a student that's gone to games as a student, from that perspective, kind of give me your thoughts here this week on Otis Anderson as we all share our thoughts about Otis.
Well, I remember watching Otis from the stands in 2019. That was that's what was in stands as a student. But even before that, I was watching him on TV as a kid at Haggerty High School in 2017, 2018. And I think that, people talk about Adrian Killens and how he kind of embodied the UC fast era, but Otis Anderson, I think, is the underrated person in that category. I mean, looking back at some of his highlights, that juke that he had against FAU was just absolutely amazing. And from what I've been seeing across Twitter, he was just as a vibrant person to be around. And so, I mean, I think that it's all sort of embodies how much life he had ahead of him with just how, bright he was on the field. He could do receiving. He could do a running back. He was a very, very important offensive weapon for this UCF team that was focusing on this UC fast type thing. And so to see his life end too soon is incredibly tragic. And I'm glad that I'm hearing that his mother who was also injured in the altercation that led to the arrest of his father. But I'm very glad that his mother seems to be recovering and that the UCF community is doing what they can to support her in this time. And I have my thoughts on Twitter as well. So yeah, it was a tough day. I'll say that it was a very tough day.
It's a tough day, and it's been a tough week. Just to deal from a UCF student perspective, UCF media standpoint, UCF player standpoint, UCF alum standpoint, for sure.
Speaking of which, I read Brian Murphy's ode to Otis on the banneret.
Read that right now on blackandgoldbanneret.com.
Yeah, beautiful. Very well done, Murph. Very well done.
We will encourage everybody to check that out if you haven't had a chance to yet. Back with more on this edition of the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. And welcome back here to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Joining us now, prior to him getting ready to head out to cover UCF women's basketball against Arkansas as we record this Thursday morning, our good friend and, of course, our colleague now here at Black and Gold Banneret, Kyle Nash, joining us. Kyle, let's start with the men's side. Tough night on Wednesday night at Auburn. Really good Auburn team. By the way, I just want to give a salute to Auburn because first of all, the atmosphere in that court, that building that Bruce has kind of over there, Bruce Pearl has kind of built there at Auburn was tremendous. That was an environment, a very difficult environment that UCF entered. And then I think they played against two future NBA first-round picks, maybe two lottery picks, depending on how the rest of the season. Jabari Smith has been well talked about. He led Auburn with 20.7 rebounds in the ball game. He was phenomenal. He could be maybe the top 2 pick in the draft coming up. But then, to me, the star of the game was Walker Kessler. 17 points, 14 boards, 6 blocks. I mean, UCF just had no answers for him. Auburn shot the ball well from the three-point line, 10 of 32, especially in the first half they did. UCF was led by Darius Perry, who had 18 points in the game to lead the way, but UCF only shot 4 of 24 from the three-point line. And as a result, Auburn gets the victory, 85-68. UCF drops their second game in a row. They're now 4-2. They lost to Oklahoma at home on Saturday. I know you were there, but first, kind of your thoughts on Auburn. The way I look at it, Auburn is just a better team. They had the 2 best players on the court.
Well, when you have a better team and they catch fire at the same time, that's a dangerous combination all in itself. I love you that you bring up Walker Kessler. I mean, it comes off the stat sheet that he has 6 blocks. That's impressive. But when you can block a dude like Shikambake Zhang with the ease that he did, that's saying something, right? This is the part that you're talking about with future NBA player written all over it, is when you see something like that. And just the tempo with which Auburn moved was amazing. And the one good thing that if I'm Johnny Dawkins that I focus on when I'm talking to my guys after this game, a 17-pointer, nobody wants to experience that. But I say to them, listen, guys, you were with them in the first half playing UCF style basketball, the basketball I called for when I talked about how the game against Oklahoma could have gone a little bit better, a 3-point loss the other day against a current but not soon to be Big 12 school. In other words, life where we're going to be headed in the future, right? Allegedly by, at least 2023, if not sooner, depending on how the suits do it. But that attacking of the backcourt, they had 4 steals, Eric, within the first few minutes to really kind of get them in the game and assert a presence. And then Auburn started breaking the press. Now, if that's something that could be done or accounted for by getting more people involved in it, swinging around more depth, I don't know what the answer is tactically. That's why I'm not Coach Johnny Dawkins. But what I noticed is when they were pressing early and attacking, they were keeping up there with points. The points off for turnovers for UCF is 13. I'm sure most of those are from the 11 steals that they had on the night. And I mean, listen, if you go cold shooting while another team's going 31% from behind the arc, you're going to get beat by a bad team that way. And here comes Auburn. That is not a bad team. There's a reason they're ranked, folks. And honestly, I know UCF isn't necessarily a basketball popular team, but that particular performance that you saw was not only proof that they were in the top 25, but maybe they should be a little higher, even depending on how things go.
Oh, I agree. I think they're an SEC title contender in basketball. With those two guys in particular, Smith and Kessler, you mentioned the defense that Auburn brings. They are going to be a team to be dealt with. And that's why, Kyle, when I looked at this stretch, I thought the goal was, realistically was to split. And the one that kind of stings is the loss at home to Oklahoma. Really good game. You were there in the building. Talk to me about the Oklahoma game. You wrote about it. You can read it. People can read about the recap there and your thoughts on the blackandgoldbanneret.com right now. But the thing that was kind of, was that last possession of the game where UCF couldn't even get a shot up to tie the game up. And it seemed like nobody really wanted to either take the shot or they just didn't feel comfortable there. Maybe, that's part of kind of still playing again. I don't know what was your thoughts on that last possession there? Because that was a tight game throughout, and unfortunately, Oklahoma made plays at the end, and UCF didn't.
And listen, give Oklahoma credit, like you said. I mean, the thread between this game, Auburn, and when they hosted University of Jacksonville and struggled a bit, even the common thread between those 3 games is they actually had size to compete. Not necessarily neutralize Bakke or CJ Walker, but certainly put up a little bit of a fight to where the rebound numbers weren't going to skew in direction of the Knights, by great piece. So you were in a position where the guards would have to fill in that gap with shooting, that sort of thing. But to answer that final possession question, Coach Dawkins was asked about that specifically, and really what had happened was, as they say, was that they were looking to try to get a quick 2, and listen, that strong presence in the middle prevented that. And then once they actually reasserted in a presence to kind of attack the lane, by then it was already too late. The strategy was awkward. One could argue that they should have been doing some sort of picks and roundabouts to try to set up the chuck it for 3. I mean, but they were looking for that. There's so many different pieces. Really what it came down to is right before the end of the game, and I mentioned this in my article, there was a tough 2-pointer. Yeah, it was in the paint, but he had a guy in front of him, and there was, I think it might have even been Bakke. He shot it over. I could be wrong, but a very tough contested 2-pointer that put Oklahoma up by 3 with those few seconds left on the clock. That's really what decided it for me, in my mind, to put UCF in the position to have to try to come up with that last-minute miracle from 3 to tie it.
In fairness, by the way, Oklahoma beat Florida on Wednesday night. Florida's right. So there's a good chance, Porter Moser and Oklahoma, they might be ranked by next week. So we're playing good competition is kind of my point on that. My concern right now is the struggles of Brandon Mayhem and Isaiah Adams a little bit. That's the thing that kind of concerns me, Kyle, a little bit. Brandon was 1 for 10 against Auburn, struggled only 5 points in 29 minutes. He's a streaky player, so we kind of seen this before. But then Isaiah Adams, 19 minutes, scored 9 points, but he was only 5 of 9 from the free throw line. And I'll never forget during the Auburn game where they got, I believe, extra free throws, a flagrant foul. I forget what they call it in college now because I was in NBA mode on Wednesday night because I was covering the Magic game. But he misses the free throw, and you could tell he was upset. And I get a sense that Isaiah's pressing at times. He's just not finding his rhythm. Are you concerned about Brandon and Isaiah? What are you seeing there? Because to me, for UCF to be an NCAA tournament team, they need Brandon and or Isaiah to get going offensively. I think that's, to me, they got to find their rhythm within this team.
Right. I didn't know. I couldn't put it better. You talk about depth and what this team lives on, right? You could either have a Dre Fuller happen, who's getting 9 points off the bench to save the day and kick some butt and, do all that. Or you may have a situation where you have a guy like a Mahan who you use the word streaky. If you're streaky, then that means you got to come in and find fire quickly in a situation where there's depth, or you're not going to be on the floor very long. And then if you're not on the floor very long, you can't get into a rhythm to get hot and have a good streak. So that's the downside there, is if you got players like that need to get hot, and I think this is a bad part of the schedule to try to find that too, by the way, right? Where you got Oklahoma and then Auburn back to back. What I think should, if it were me, what could happen is that over the next two games, Bethune-Cookman and North Carolina A&T, not necessarily national powers by any stretch. This could be the opportunity for Brandon Mahan to get in the game and kind of find his rhythm. As far as Adams, it's different with him because he has flashes on either side. He'll go for a bit, had an awesome dunk in the season opener, and then he'll go flat like you're talking about and have a moment here and there on free throws. I'm not as worried about Zay. He's just kind of having more peaks and valleys. But Mahan, listen, this is my first time covering this team, and Mahan was one of the names I was told to watch for. And to your point, he hasn't shown me too much yet, but for the, as it's turned out, the team's gone and found ways to win without him nailing it. But if they want to beat the Auburns of the world, he's got to step in and hit those big shots.
No doubt about that. And especially they got, I think Bethune-Cookman and North Carolina A&T, you mentioned that Bethune is Sunday at 2:00, North Carolina A&T Saturday, December 11th at 2:00, both games at home. I think those are, to me, the things that I want to see. Is I want to see Mayhem and Adams, get into a rhythm offensively. I think you're going to see some things cleaned up defensively, because then you go to Temple for your first conference game, believe it or not, December 15th, your conference opener at Temple. Then you play Florida State at Sunrise, December 18th. That's two big pivotal games. And if UCF wants to win those two games, they got to get Mahan. Got to get Adams going. I think this team is still good. I'm not panicking over the overall results. These are good teams they played, but I think you're looking at some things they got to kind of get better at if they want to reach the goals of the NCAA tournament, because I think it's a very thin margin of error to make the NCAA tournament. The American is tougher, and I think the sport as a whole, I've watched a lot of college basketball, over the holidays with all the tournaments. I think this year there's much more quality on the court than there has been the last couple of years. So it's not going to be It's not going to be easy to make the field of 68.
Yeah, I mean, we talk. What's the story throughout the country, Eric? That everybody's returning people that would have graduated if it weren't for COVID, and now they're another year smarter, and the chemistry is another year built. Oh, who knew it would get better, right?
Yeah, no doubt. So we'll see what happens with UCF men's basketball. Meanwhile, the women, while we were focused on Black Friday football and men's basketball, they were out in the Cancun Challenge at Riviera, Mexico, and swept their two games. They beat Idaho State 58-41 and then beat USC 56-47. They outscored the Trojans 22-7 in the fourth quarter to pull away and win that game. Diamond Battles was the tournament MVP in the game. In that tournament, she had 13 points to lead the way in the victory against USC. Once again, defensively, they kind of clammed down on the Trojans. They really shut them down. They held them to a 13 for 47 from the field, 27% from the field for USC. And UCF defensively finding a way. And it was great to see Diamond Battles, who's had two great games, 100% healthy and active there, Kyle, for UCF. And now they will host Arkansas, a tournament team, at home. This is a big game. UCF women's basketball is getting votes. Who's to say if they were to knock off Arkansas, maybe for the first time in the Division I era, UCF might crack the top 25. That's how big this game is with Arkansas.
Yeah, isn't that amazing though? And listen, Eric, give it where it's due. Even before the Cancun Challenge happened, they played against Belmont, a team that's notoriously good for shooting from three, and the kind of team that could surprise UCF. Listen, this group is not known for chucking it from the cheap seats. That's not really their forte. But in the second half, really started to light it up, and it was a shootout that UCF won. You're not supposed to see that from these ladies. This is a powered team, right? Coach A believes in post players and things like that, but they were firing from the arc as well, and I want to bring that in there. I know that game's a couple of weeks back before the Cancun Challenge there, but I think that's this. Whatever happened in the Tennessee game, this team's woken up since then, right? They haven't lost a beat, 4 more wins since then, and they're coming in. This Arkansas game, to your point, is a big deal. But, Eric, what I want to also point out going into tonight, where I will be in the house and definitely be writing about it, something else I'm going to be interested to hear from Coach Abe about is for the next month, basically, they are not going to be in the house. So, how do you prepare for a series of road trips, a run like that? Going to be very interesting to see. But I'll tell you, if you're going to have to face that, you might as well do it on a hot streak. And if you can't do it on a hot streak where you happen to beat Arkansas, that'd be nice.
You make a great point, and I'm glad about this schedule. It's pretty wide. After the home game against Arkansas, Sunday, December 12th, they're off for 10 days. They're at Mercer. Then on Tuesday, the 14th, they're at Seton Hall. Very good Big East program. The big one that's probably circled in a lot of fans, December 18th at Iowa. That is a monster game. Caitlin Clark, that's a name to remember. We'll talk more about her as we get closer to that Iowa game. She is arguably the top 2 women's basketball player in the country. Iowa is a Sweet 16 team. Beckers is the Connecticut star player that's probably ahead of Clark, but she's a future WNBA star. UCF's going to have their hands full with Iowa, but that's part of this road trip. They go to Princeton on the 29th before finally UCF comes back January 2nd. That is a long time, but they're not ducking anybody. They're getting the frequent mileage on that.
Oh, right. Yeah. I mean, hey, if anything, they can buy the flights in bulk, so to speak. Yeah. And listen, you mentioned the big game against, and they're going to face Clark at Iowa. I can't help but think to myself, as you mentioned that, Eric, that this women's team is designed to defend against star players, right? Defensively built. Don't come in the middle because you'll have to battle Destiny Thomas and Brittany Smith. That's its own challenge in and of itself. And then outside, they play relentless defense, much like the men. They like to go full court press and attack defensively to force you into mistakes. How many points has Diamond Battles had off of steals? And then, with Alicia Lewis doing her thing at the point guard spot, it's very interesting seeing Diamond Battles play off the ball a little bit more. Certainly a key to her higher point totals of late.
No doubt about that. Should be fascinating. So, yeah, enjoy UCF women's basketball in person for the last time for a while. For the last time in the new year. This is it. The next time you'll see UCF women's basketball at home, we'll have a new year, 2022. It's going to be wild how they do against Arkansas. Again, NCAA tournament team, one of the top teams in the SEC, in last year anyway. And then obviously this long road trip. You don't see this often, but this is part of Coach Abe and their way of bonding, right? Chemistry, spending a lot of time together, and to kind of build that toughness and be prepared once you get into conference play is the goal here, I would imagine.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned conference play and preparation. Much like Coach Dawkins, Coach Abe has done her part to make sure they're ready for life at the next chapter within the Big 12 when they get there. And how many I lost count of how many times at Hoops Media Day, I know that's a month ago now, but that she mentioned how difficult scheduling was to get teams to play UCF on the schedule. And here we go with a 4-game away streak. 2 of them three of them right together with Mercer, Seton Hall, and Iowa. So, at least when they head to Princeton after the holiday, they've got, 11 days there, but rigorous is the word I would use, Eric.
Well, it should be a good one there. Enjoy the game. I know you'll recap it for us here on blackandgoldbanneret.com afterwards. Make sure you check that out, as well as all the latest in UCF news. We'll wrap this show up, though, Kyle, with your thoughts. If we've kind of obviously tribute this show to Otis Anderson, the late Otis Anderson. And I remember, you have covered him for lengthy. We had Brian at the beginning. We've had, Andrew's thoughts, Bryson's thoughts. And I want to get your thoughts because you covered him and spent a lot of time with him. And this has been a difficult week for us as UCF alums and a UCF family with the loss of Otis, such a young age, 23, and a tragic deal. What's kind of your two thoughts here as that's kind of an Otis here moving forward?
Yeah, no, listen, when it comes to Otis, and just for a bit of context, I've been covering UCF football. This past season was my 5th season, so I was doing it before I was here at the Banneret. But through that time, back when you still had breakout interviews before COVID, Jawan Hamilton, Adrian Killens, and Otis Anderson were the guys I was talking to just before the season started in 2017. And it's funny with Otis, I never seen a cat who's more modest and yet more playful at the same time. And every time I talked to him, it would be him and Adrian Killens having so much fun. And it was a very spirit lifting kind of thing. And I think in all this tragedy, what I found what's toughest for me to kind of wrap my arms around is that how much he paid tribute to his dad throughout that too. So, adding just more confusion is what's gone on. But what I do remember most is the mix of tenacity and playfulness in this kid. I asked him once, because he played all over the offensive field except for on the O-line, basically, right? I asked him once, so you're getting in the backfield, you're splitting out at wide receiver, what should I list you as? And he just smiled and said, offensive specialist. Like that joke right there, being playful but being competitive, really kind of is a microcosm of the personality and tenacity of what he brought, not just to the game, but even when he was at the press conference, he would be all business, but would make jokes when he could, that kind of thing. And I think that was just his approach to life based on my interactions with him. And, certainly prayers to those around him, his fans and all of that, and well wishes. And yeah, I'm as somebody who air quotes only covered him, I'm still kind of trying to figure it out myself.
I think we are, unfortunately. But as I mentioned with Brian at the beginning of all this, how many people can say they lived 23 years and made the impact that Otis did? And I think this episode, hopefully between our staff, gives you an idea of the impact Otis has made, because everything you said is exactly what I agree with. Especially, he was always the guy. Today we're going to get to talk to Otis. This is going to be fun. I really don't know what he's going to say, but it's going to be really good. But he was very thoughtful and so smart. I remember asking him at meet about being in the room, in a running back room, in a wide receiver room. Is that really difficult? And he's like, hey, man, it's ball. We're just playing ball. And I like hanging out with these guys. That was kind of the way he talked. And I always say he was the glue of this team in a lot of ways. And his memories will last forever. That's for sure.
Undoubtedly.
So many iconic moments. I'll never forget that 2018 championship game where he catches that touchdown, that building goes up. You were in there, and he's got the peace sign. There's so many. We could do hours of shows, the highlights. But he's always going to be a big part of UCF football program. He's always going to be a part of UCF in general. And, it's just it's unfortunate that he's gone, but we will always have his memories. And I think that's the best way I can – maybe we get through this together as a UCF family, as UCF alums. It's been a tough week, but I think we've done a good job of talking about Otis and the impact he's made. I think everybody's kind of offered their piece. Kyle, you were fantastic on that. I want to thank everybody on this show, Bryson Turner, Andrew Glukoff, of course, Brian Murphy was with me at the beginning, and for Jeff, who's obviously recovering from back surgery as well. I know it's been a tough week for him, not just physically, but obviously with this news. But it's been a difficult week for everybody. But we'll never forget you, Otis. You will always be a part of UCF lores and legacy. Thank you for all the memories, Otis. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret.